Every person should have the experience I just had. But I'm glad we could share it together. Deval, you want to do this one? Thank you, Elaine Zecker and Rosalie Boxt, for a spectacular service. Who would have thought we could take this room at the luxurious Doubletree and make it into a true Kehillah Kadosha and bring us such beautiful tefillah this morning? What can I say, Elaine, how much it means? Although I've learned a lot in the 30 years since that day. You know, I advise everyone, if someone like Jesse Jackson were to happen to say something like New York was Hymietown, don't just jump on a train to Harlem, knock on a black church, and say, hey, can we dialogue? But we've learned a lot since then. And although some days I feel like nothing changes. It makes so much sense that you and our beloved colleagues, Ron Friedman and Roy and Matt Soffer, and Bernard and Abstentia and Stephanie Colin, who will always be on the team, and all of the incredible leaders of Temple Israel in Boston, many of whom came to Washington today to be here, which is so moving to me. It's so meaningful that you led this service on behalf of the Central Conference of American Rabbis, because we proved in Boston something quite radical and wonderful at the same time, that we could actually join together across lines of race and class and faith and lift up a vision of equity and of justice. And so many of our interfaith partners from Massachusetts are also here in Washington with us. And you know me, I want to name every one of you, and I can't, but I will say that when Reverend Hammond gives the benediction in a few minutes, he will offer prayer on behalf of all of you. So when he stands before you, he represents you and channels all of you as well. And you saw a moment earlier when so many of the mentors, rabbis I've worked with, educators, leaders, who mentored and trained me came up and read liturgy. There are even more of you in the congregation. And again, if I named all of you, we wouldn't have time. But I do want to say Arnie Graff is here. And where's Arnie Graff? Arnie is... more affordable housing has been built, more public schools have been transformed, more neighborhoods have been saved by a guy you've never heard of. And that's what it is to be a community organizer. This is the guy who trained a guy named Barry Obama and said, go back and get clear on your story. It's in the book, by the way. And so there are so many of us. I talked about last night how David Saperstein has given rise to tens of thousands of Jewish activists who fight for what's right because of all of us who are his disciples. Arnie Graff has given rise to tens of thousands of organizers who are transforming neighborhoods. And Rabbis Rick Jacobs and David Saperstein, what can I say in thanks to you? I met David before I even met Dana at that conference room in the Religious Action Center. And there is so much that I have said and will say in celebration and praise of David. For this moment, I want to acknowledge the incredible gift. If you know the RAC, it is like David's baby. When he was cradling that Torah in his arms and looking into my eyes and trying to decide, should he actually... And I'm glad this was live streamed and on tape because you have handed it on. But in all seriousness, David, I will care for your beloved, our beloved RAC, and that wonderful staff, and the wonderful lay leaders and stakeholders who love it so, as I would carry the Torah from you. And Rick Jacobs, the favorite thing that you say about me, and you say a lot of nice things. I got to duck because I got a speaker on the way here. Could you be a little not as tall? Thank you. So, Rick, when he introduces me places, like to say that when he was elected URJ president, he made 2 phone calls. The first was to Susie to let her know the news, and the second was to me to ask me to join him in leadership. I will never never forget the grace of that call, except that it was superseded 3 years later when he called to give me the great news that Rabbi David Saperstein had been nominated as ambassador at large. And Rick said, well, what about the RAC? And so began an incredible journey. The journey through Just Congregations, which, because David, well, Daphne, where's Daphne? I want it, so you can clap for Daphne. So I needed to pitch to David the idea of Just Congregations, but I couldn't get him to spend like 10 minutes talking about it. So Daphne tricked him at a biennial to being like down in the basement and said, I don't know even how she got him there, but there he was. And I did the pitch and he said, you know what, this is a good idea. We should do this. And the rest is history. And I've been joined by an incredible staff team. Steph Colin is here and Julie Weil is here and Joy Friedman is here. And the incredible rabbis and leaders of Just Congregations. I am who I am what I am because we are who we are. And we did what we did. And so I share this with all of you. So now I get the great gift of the incredible RAC staff and the incredible Just Congregations team. And we go forward together. I'm also grateful to our incredible partners. Steve Sachs is the chair of the board of the URJ. Jen Kaufman is the chair of the Commission on Social Action. We have incredible support from our lay leadership, and in naming them, I thank all of you who volunteer your time and your talent to be the leaders that will make this movement thrive. And it is such a blessing that when I walk the halls of Congress, I get to say I represent 1.5 million Reformed Jews in 900 plus congregations and 2,000 members of the Central Conference of American Rabbis. And so I am so grateful to Denise Ager, our president, who is making history, not just in who she is, but in what she does, and our great chief executive, Steve Fox, and Seth Limmer, who is the chair of the Peace and Justice Committee of the CCR. We are truly blessed to have you all, and I'm thankful. The most important thanks to offer this morning, of course, and I won't show the picture that I showed to the Commission on Social Action, but to my beloved Dana, I showed the Commission on Social Action the picture taken in 1985, please, at the Social Action table of Crafty Spring. It was Nifty, whatever we call it now, Nifty, New York. In the Social Action table, we were fighting for economic justice, getting people to write letters because we had come back from a training at the RAC. And we're all energized, and so I want to give a particular shout out to all of the Nifty kids who are here and the Social Action young people who are with us. Because the timing might be right for them, 40 years, I don't know. Hopefully there'll be other opportunities as well. But my beloved Dana has been an incredible partner with me in this work since those Social Action days back in Nifty. And to Noah and Bobby and Kate, who are here, and to your sister, Juliet, who is not here because I think she's with Anat Hoffman somewhere. I think they're laying down in traffic in Jerusalem, not let it until they allow the women to have the equal prayer space at the wall, right? You gotta love it. You gotta love it when on the eve of your installation as the director of the RAC, your teenage daughter eclipses you by doing civil disobedience at the Kotel. But in all seriousness, Bobby, Kate, and Noah have lived in Boston their entire lives. And they are giving us an enormous gift by being willing to hear the call, as Rick amplified, that comes from a very high place. No, even higher than Rick, who's tall. Because indeed, it is a call, and you are coming and enabling that journey. And I'm most grateful to all of you. And I want to say, in a point of personal privilege, it's much different when a congregational rabbi gets recruited to a new community because there is a built-in congregation of welcome. And I know Johnny Roos and Bruce Lustig and Danny Zemmel, you're out there saying, come join us, be part of us. But you haven't done like the recruitment thing, rollout, the way a synagogue would if I were your next rabbi. So I do want to say to Dana and to Bobby and Kate, this is our congregation. We are the community of justice of the Reform movement who love you and support you in ways that you know and that you don't know. But thank you for the grace and the generosity of coming on this journey to Washington. And finally, in words of thanks, to my brother Deval Patrick. Oh, I can't thank you yet. I got to thank my parents. I'm sorry. I'm a little verklempt. Bobby, Kate, Noah, and Juliet, and Dana could only do this because of the incredible love and support of my mom, Carol, who, I'm giving a press conference. While everybody's going to Lobby Day, that we're going to release the faith budget, which is the other budget. As Congress is releasing their budget, we're going to do like the budget that we heard called for by Brian Stevenson and by Deval Patrick, a budget of kindness and compassion and justice. And I'll be speaking at the press conference with Sister Simone, the nun on the bus. Gotta love her. And I will say that after the tragic death of my father, I was raised by a single working mother. I grew up in rent-control housing and went to a decent public school. And if you want to know what a hero looks like, my mom looks in the mirror and sees one. And everybody should have what I have, is to marry and then get an upgrade, because I got two more. I got an incredible Ann and Mike Gershon, who are phenomenal human beings, making the world a better place every day with their research. And then, God bless my father-in-law, he was the one who asked Wendy Sherman the question that upstaged everybody this morning. Forget about you and me, Deval and Brian. That was the moment. So now let me thank Deval Patrick and then give a word of Torah, and then I promise I will be done. You inspired us all this morning and said just the words of inspiration and praise and the call to action that we needed to hear and that I needed to hear. And I want to acknowledge that you and I and so many people in this room work together to prove what you said. We proved that when faith leaders, elected officials, and stakeholders come together and hold ourselves accountable to our highest moral values and transcend the narrow parochial or political self-interests, we can act for the common good. But I also want to say that you have played a unique role in my own life that I want to amplify for everybody gathered here. That story that you told, which is an inspiring story, was a story you told me personally just after it happened, at a moment of discernment when I was trying to decide what to do with my life. And whether I could uproot my family and really come to Washington and follow the incredible path of David Saperstein. And you told me that story. And I'm like, Deval, I need advice, not a story. And then you said to me, Jonah, why is it that when people are doing the right thing, they whisper? Why doesn't the moral voice cry out in full throat? Why don't you go to Washington and be the moral voice? And by the way, you weren't alone. A lot of people in this room kept saying to me, Jonah, go to Washington. And so you inspired me, as you inspire us all this morning, to ask the question, how will we be the moral voice? And your call echoes through thousands of years of Jewish history and tradition, through that Torah scroll that David passed to me. The words that we read this morning, Kiddoshim Tihiyu, you shall be holy. Ki kadosh ani Adonai Elohechem, for I, Adonai, am holy. God is calling on us. God is demanding of us, do as I say and act as I do, to be holy, to lift ourselves up to that higher plane, the aspirational place of life, that space that differentiates from the world below, that strives towards the divine. That is to be in the place that actually emulates the divine in word and in deed. And we know that those commandments in the text, the holiness code that we read this morning, they are a commingling of ritual and ethical. As the governor said, Shabbat and morality. We hear about worship and sacrifice, but we also hear about leaving the corners of our fields and so many other ethical commandments. But for me, the text culminates exactly where Rabbi Zecher and Cantor Box culminated for us this morning. Do not hate your brother in your heart. Rebuke your fellow so that you bear no guilt. Do not take vengeance or bear grudge, but v'ahavta re'echa kamocha. Love your neighbor as yourself. To me, these words embody the very point of the Holiness Code. They are critical to the idea of a just society. The first verse links that feeling of hatred with rebuke. The text demands that we rebuke our fellow, lest we incur guilt. That if we see an injustice, if we witness a wrong, and we do not speak out in rebuke, then we have become complicit. We ourselves become the perpetrators of the injustice. And so that's why we begin to hate. When we witness the cruelty, the brokenness, and the suffering that is all around us in the world, God challenges us, do not hate, but rather rebuke and love. Speak out with that moral voice, not in a whisper, but in a cry. And then what? And then love. V'ahavta re'echa kamocha. Did you hear Brian Stevenson this morning? It is that moment when his mother corrected him in rebuke because she saw the injustice and in love said, go tell that boy, I love you. And the boy says, the boy who he teased, the boy who represents the brokenness of the world and our fear of that which is broken in us. And that boy says, I love you too. Our call for justice is the ultimate expression of our love for another human being. The moral voice embodies the love for every human being. I know that our moral call for justice is that which transforms our world, which is so full of suffering and hate, into the world we yearn it to be, overflowing with love. That's what it means to be holy. That's what it is to be godly. But let us remember what Dr. King taught us. Martin Luther King famously said, love without power is naive. So let us not be naive. The Civil Rights Act of 1964, drafted in part in our beloved Religious Action Center, would never have passed without real political power. The Voting Rights Act of 1965 would have been just a dream had it not been for the tens of thousands of ministers and rabbis and priests and lawyers and activists and leaders, organized, passionate, dedicated leaders who took great risks. I see David Goodman is here today, the brother of Andrew Goodman. David told me recently when we were in Selma together, he remembers, David, stand up for just a second. He remembers as the older brother, he remembers when Andrew came home and had to have his mother sign his permission slip to go down and register voters. Can you imagine? Your child asks your permission and you sign off. That's what it is to take risk. That's what it is to lift up our moral voice. That's what it is to make sacrifice, to build enough political power to realize that dream and make it a reality. Let us build the political power that it will take, that is necessary to rise to the moral challenges of our day. Because though we have come so far, and we have come very far, as Brian Stevenson and Deval Patrick and so many remind us, we have so far to go. Whether it is in a country on the other side of the globe, or in Israel, or in neighborhoods walking distance from this hotel, that I have to explain to my children why so many people, just to get from the metro to the hotel, ask for a handout. This is the United States of America. And yet, So many souls suffer from the grinding hunger of poverty and the modern forms of bondage. And as our climate changes, the poorest suffer, and we know we continue to confront discrimination insidiously across the world. But let us remember, Kedoshim, in the face of all this suffering, do not hate, rebuke, and love. Because Dr. King also said, power without love is tyranny. Perhaps he understood that hate could lead one to build power with no love, which is yet another form of bondage. So let us hold ourselves accountable in every moment of our work, because we will be judged not by the political victories that we win, but the extent to which we built heaven on earth. That to the extent we brought God into this place, that we maintained our vision of that which is holy, a world overflowing with God's love. So friends, we know our task. God has been speaking to us and reminding us of it all through this morning. Our beloved Religious Action Center of Reform Judaism sits at the nexus between power and love. It is our work to bring together hundreds of thousands, if not millions of our followers, those who find meaning and purpose in the prophetic call of Reform Judaism to overcome hate and cry out to justice, to reach out across lines of race and class and faith and political party, to play the role that the Jewish people have played throughout history, time and again, beginning with our exodus from Egypt and marching wherever people struggle wherever there is injustice, to do justice, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with our God. Thank you. God bless you. Amen.